Hey guys, this is Scott Augustine for CardRest.com, bringing you another no limit video of 3 tables of 5-10 and one of 10-20. The 10-20 is going to be in the bottom right, and I think there's some interesting spots in this video. I recorded about an hour and 15 minutes of footage. I skipped ahead a little bit at the start because it took a little bit to get underway. I've got some stacks, or not some stacks, but a little above 100 big blinds on a couple of 5-10 tables, but nothing really happened. I think I got in like queens against ace king or something and won, and then lost a little bit back. It wasn't very exciting at all, so I skipped a little bit ahead. And just looking at these tables, they look to be pretty good tables. The one in the bottom right, Rake Me Up, I don't have a ton of experience with. Mr. Lucky Pants I've played a ton with, and I think he's also appeared in a few videos, and so should be fairly familiar with him. And then Gyongler, however you want. I'm just gonna say G again. I think he's also appeared in some videos. I think he's probably definitely the weakest spot of these three. Mr. Lucky Pants definitely plays an unorthodox style, and I'm probably down a significant portion to him, most of it being heads up and three-handed, but I think I've got a pretty good read on him, and so hopefully we can exploit some things against him. I don't think we get into too many tough spots against him, if I remember correctly, but we'll see. We'll get into a hand with Rake Me Up in a little bit to start us off, so I'm just going to start the video. And flat ace 10 suited to a guy who's playing 34 and 15. I switch on and off between the HUD. If I'm playing more than 4 tables, if I'm playing like 4 tables only, I probably would play without the HUD, but I kept it on for video's sake. I find it pretty helpful though, as I explained earlier, when playing 8 to 10 tables of these mid stakes. And so he checks behind the flop, and putting his range, I have no idea. He seems pretty loose pre-flop, and I think his range just widened a little bit for raising on the cutoff, obviously. And then on this board, I think he can be taking a lot of pot control lines with like pocket nines. Maybe he has like king jack, queen jack. Both flush draws miss, so I think it's a really easy value bet. I think the sizing's pretty good. I think 100 might scare him off with some jacks, just in terms of the absolute size of it. And so I definitely don't want to do that. And he min raises me. I have no idea what he can really have here, and that's why I call. I don't think, given the pot odds, that I'm good enough in a vacuum to call here. I don't think it's a plus EV call, but I think it's slightly minus EV, and I think there's going to be a lot of spots where he's opening the cutoff and button, and I'm going to be defending with a really wide range against this type of player. And so I just wanted to see what the hell he could do this with. I'm guessing maybe like pocket jacks or something random. He could also just have like a random bluff. I've seen all sorts of things show up here. Maybe like 7-5 of clubs. It's really tough to say. So I deliberate, and then I decide that I'm getting the right price to call, and I will make the call in a moment. Shorter stack getting an all in the bottom left. Not a short stack, just a person with a shorter stack who's big things. He's playing 40-0 for 10 hands, so definitely a good spot for us. And we defend the king-queen suited, despite having 500 hands against Rake Me Up. I think it all came from one session, and I think it was about 2 months ago. And we see in the top left, he shows up with 8-9, which is just really unexpected for me. I have no idea why he played like that, but we're going to use. I think it's really helpful that I called there, because we can use that information to know that if he's betting this flop, it's not with a draw nearly as often as you'd think it might be. So he might not be check raising some weaker semi bluffs and some weaker aces for value, whatever, thinking we're going to stack some draws or get some value, because we probably won't if he's not betting a draw on this board. So it's just something to be wary of. He could also be the type of player that if he has a straight draw and there's a flush draw out there, he's going to play it really passively, but if he had a flush draw, he's going to play it really aggressively. So I'll just keep an eye out for him to see what he does with his flush draws in similar scenarios, and then make a note accordingly. I defend king-queen suited from a small blind against Rake Me Up. I don't think it's a good spot for a 3-bet there. I just sat at this table like 13 hands ago, as you see from my HUD, and I haven't really done much of consequence. I think I stole the blinds a couple times. If I'd been playing there a while, I think this is definitely a really good board to lead with my hand, because he won't give me credit for a lot of things. He'll think I'm leading with like Queen 10 offsuit or whatever, and raise a lot of hands that then I can either force out their equity by re-raising or kind of trap them. I have a lot of options from there. And I think he'll check back a lot of like 9-10 type hands a decent amount of the time, so I'll get value from those when he does have those, and I can lead and call. But without that history against this guy, he seems really aggressive. But he seems aggressive, but I think it's a controlled aggression. And just taking a blind look at his stats, I think he's probably a pretty decent player. The one thing that was a little interesting is if you look back at his stats, his cutoff, he steals very, very wide from the button, but his cutoff steal is not very high at all comparatively. In general, if someone has a very high button steal and they're a good player, I find that their cutoff steal is probably like 4/5 of their button steal, maybe 3/5, something along those lines. And his was like 20% of his button steal was like fairly reasonable, of like 70, or not even reasonable, 77. You take a look at his stats there, and that's what actually made me play this hand really, really defensively, because I don't think he's betting like King 10 on this turn. And so my plan was, like, check call the flop, I think's fine. Check raising is also viable if he's going to, like, spaz out with a lot of hands and put me on so many draws on this board. So I think leading, check calling, or check raising are all viable on this flop. I chose to take a really passive line because I don't have a good read on him at all. And this is our first confrontation, so I thought he'd play a little more in line against me. And we get a 6 of clubs turn. I check call. I expect him to be barreling this somewhat often, but I don't think he's going to be betting this again, the turn again with like King 10 or whatever. I think he's probably going to check behind there. Maybe he will. I'm not exactly sure. He might do like a bet the turn with like King 10 to get value from like my draws or single club type hands, like I don't even know what I'd show up with here. I guess like pocket 10s with the 10 of clubs. Some sort of float I was on, maybe I was check raising or whatever, and maybe try to push out the equity like a Jack 10 type hand has against him, or 6-7. And I check call again on the turn. The river is interesting. The flush completes, and I think it's actually very viable. I'm almost positive the one read I have on this guy is that I'm pretty sure from his stats, and he is also from Norway or the Netherlands. I think if I rolled my mouse over him earlier, is that I think in our previous session I took a few more passive check call lines against him for value because he was playing much more aggressive in those sessions post flop. And so I think on this river, with that previous history and that I'd been slow playing a little bit more in his eyes, I think I can probably fold this because I don't think he's betting like King 10, so he basically just has to be turning a hand into a bluff. And I think I'm fine calling this if he's opening a lot wider from the cutoff, but 20% from the cutoff is pretty damn tight, and it's not like he's betting like queens on this river or King 10, as I said. So I'm never beating any value hands. It's a pretty big bet, and I just don't think I have enough information to call here profitably. I mean, I wouldn't hate a call. I review on the other side of the screen if there's any hands that could actually give me any sort of hint of what he's been doing there, and there really wasn't, other than he 3-bet G, who button opened, G small 4-bet him, he called, and then G fired a pot size bet on just like a dry flop, and he check folded. So that didn't really tell me much, because junglers 3-betting and 4-betting sizes are generally much smaller than other people, so people tend to peel them later. So I don't think he's just out of control or whatever. And so I think this is for value much more often with that bet sizing, and I decided to let it go. The one problem I come into there is, unless I am slow playing something, if I'm folding like King Queen there, it's like the top of my range. But he doesn't know I'm folding King Queen there, so it's not going to affect things too much until he starts to get an idea that, wow, I might be able to triple barrel this guy a ton. For all he knows, I was contemplating a hero call. So I think that's fine. I wouldn't mind a call there at the start of the session just to kind of establish, like, I'm not going to get bluffed off or whatever. But if you call there and you're wrong, it can kind of establish a session of like he kind of has control of the session against you for the most part. So four-handed, I didn't want to give him that edge just at the start, so I decided to fold. And that's something I definitely have changed since probably even a year ago, is I would just always call very, very, very often at the start of sessions. But I think is fine in general, like against CAC Biker here when I called that ace-10 hand and got a lot of valuable information out of that bet with the odds I was being laid. But I think it's a completely different situation against Rake Me Up there on that board. To Sar Rast, Brian Rast sits to my right. He's definitely a very good cash game player. He's used to playing higher, so it's not a great scenario when he's going to enter your game at a 10-20 game. But he's on my right, so it won't be too bad, hopefully. And I don't know much about That's the Game. He buys in for weird amounts at 5, 10, and 10-20, so I'm not exactly sure what his deal is. I flat ace-8 suited here against CAC Biker, and time KPR. I've played a decent amount with him. Definitely, he starts tables with me, which I definitely think is not the norm for a lot of 5-10 players. So I give him a little more credit not a little more credit, but I give him a little more. I think he's going to be a little more aggressive than some other players against me at that level. And so I think there is a possibility he's making moves on me. And he does start to get out of line in the small blind a decent amount later on in the footage. I'm not sure if we'll get to that. But I start reacting by just 4-betting and seeing how he's going to react. I open against G here, small blind to big blind with King 7 offsuit. The success rate against him with small blind to big blind steals is very high. And when it doesn't work, he's much more likely to be flatting and then playing fit or fold than he is to be 3-betting me or trying to take away flops. So I think the value of this raise is from pre-flop, just taking it down. And I check call the flop, which I think is more than fine. I don't know if I'm ahead of his calling range, and if he's calling, he's going to have a lot of equity against me, and he will randomly stab with like pocket 5s here and then give up on the flop for no reason. And the board just runs out really terribly for me. The flush gets there, and it double pairs the pair I don't have. Plus, he will bet like, yeah, he'll probably bet like king queen here. I'm not sure if he would. He probably would. And he definitely has a 10 in his range, a jack, a flush. He likes to slow play. He can have a straight even that he's betting for value. He probably wouldn't bet king queen, but I don't think this is a board he's just randomly betting. And it's with the line I took, it's very reasonable to assume I have a 10 or a jack here. So I don't have a flush in my range, but a 10 or a jack is very viable. So I've got enough in my range there to protect myself from getting bluffed off. And the huge bet on the river looks like he's trying to just represent air too hard on that board, on that river, and just is betting too big. If he made a smaller bet, I think I'd probably call like a half pot bet, because I think it's a little more likely to be a bluff or a counterfeited pocket 8s or something. So we don't have the best image right now on the bottom right table. We have an image of someone who's playing loose but not willing to put in a lot of money or to like big bets on the river, which is not a great scenario to be in a if you're in a post flop aggressive 10-20 game. But hopefully we can turn that around there. And going around the other tables, just while there's a little lull in the action, More Rums is a very good 5-10 player. He also plays 10-20. I think I'm coming out with a 2 or 3 part League Finder series where I League find a 10-20 player who's a Card Runners member, and More Rums plays at all those tables deep. So definitely someone to be wary of at these tables. The rest of the table in the bottom left looks fairly bad. I don't know Zimmer 41 or Tolstoyek or whatever. L Creamer, I don't know why the video skipped there, but I just c-bet there with the Queen Jack suited and L Creamer folded. I think on a 7-2-2 board, you can see there's 32-20. I think his button raising thing is going to be or button defending thing is going to be much wider, and he's not going to float me with like king high there on that board. So I think it's an easy c-bet. And then open 4-6 suited, which is definitely very loose, but we're five-handed. The guy in the button is very, very tight, and time KPR seems to be getting out of line in 3-bets, mostly in the small blind or the big blind when I'm stealing. So I don't think I'm in danger of getting late 3-bet by him very often. And then the small blind's going to call a lot of hands that he shouldn't be calling out of the small blind because he's not going to be playing them aggressively enough to play them to turn a profit with them. So he's going to be calling like his king 10 offsuits, his like queen 10 offsuits, and they're just not going to be profitable. And then short putt's a player that I've got a really good read on, I think, and he does some like weird spazzy things, so I think I'm fine with that. See bet this flop. I expect to get raised a decent amount, and when I do, I want to shut out like a lot of like his ace-5 hands because they've got like much more equity than they actually do. Like I don't want to make a small raise here and have him like spaz out with like 4-5 or something, because it's gonna have a lot of equity against me compared to if I shut him out. I'm not exactly sure on the math of that. I'll have to do that at some point, but I'm pretty sure I want those shut out. And then I mean, there's already 28 big blinds in the pot, and he's got about 98 left behind. So I think a shove here is probably the easiest. I can represent a draw, and if he's got like pocket 9s, he's raising for value. He's not going to fold now, pocket 8s, because it's so draw heavy that he's going to talk himself into me having like a combo draw or whatever. And there are hands I can, like that's a good hand I can get called against and be good against. Maybe I can shut out some of his flush draws that, and like an overcard or something that might have some equity against me. But he's most likely going to call with a lot of his range here if he was raising for value, fold all of his bluffs. But the board's so draw heavy that I don't really want to call there and see what happens. He calls with the ace-8 suited. We run it twice, and I think we split. Yeah. And so, for whatever reason, my computer was slowing down whenever it was running it twice at this thing, so I'm not exactly sure what that was. But hopefully we can avoid those hiccups. And yeah, I think his play's fine. It's very conceivable I could have like a king jack of diamonds hand there, and he's just got so much equity against the majority of my range that I think he probably has to call it off there again, no matter what, unless I'm just the tightest player ever. Top right, I bet 60 here. I don't think Moy Rums is actually going to fight back me a ton on this board, because I think he's very likely to flat with a lot of hands and keep Al Crema in, and then try to like take it away from me later. So I could bet this turn, and I think it's viable. Obviously, no one's falling at 10, but I don't think anyone is continuing without a 10. And so I think I could get a ton of folds here. El Creamer's overcall is a little disturbing in terms of that, because it's very viable that he has like a slow play 9-10, a jack 10, a queen 10, 8-10, very ace 10 even with a double gutter on the flop. So I don't think a bet here is probably profitable, just because both of those players have a ton of 10s in their range. And I was thinking what I was going to do while I was in this hand, if I was in more rum spot and I had a 10, or if I just really had anything. If I had like nothing or whatever, which is pretty hard to show up with here from his angle with this board, I would probably just bet because I think he'll get a lot of folds once I check. If I was him, I would definitely check behind a 10 there, because I think Al Creamer's going to stab the river a ton if we both check through that board, and you can obviously and then you can shove or min raise depending on the strength of your 10. If you have king 10, obviously like shove or whatever, and then a min raise might elicit like some random call from, I don't know, pocket 8s or something from El Creamer, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. So if I had a 10 by more runs, I would be checking behind on the turn a lot of the time, three-handed there. And so Al Creamer stabs, and I think we both fold. And I defend pocket 4s in the small blind there. It's not a great hand against people, or against a kind of like a loose player there. but he's playing so passive that I think when it gets to showdown much more often than your normal player. And he ended up betting $50 there. I think it hiccuped on the internet connection. He bet like $30 or $50, but whatever it was, on that queen down his turn. I can't continue. It's not a good turn for me to stab at. Pocket fours in general is going to be really hard to turn a profit, especially if someone behind you is squeezing a lot when they're in the big blind. But against someone who's going to let me get showdown so easily, I think I could definitely defend it profitably. And I'm opening the button there. My plan was probably to 4-bet time KPR there because he had been pretty active with 3 bets in the small blind there, and we have 2 people sitting out, so my range is probably widened into his eyes of just having like four-handed. And I bet this flop because, yeah, I'm not getting called by worse against this player, but he's not going to be check raising me with the draws. He's going to be check calling them, so it'll really allow me to turn his hand face up if he does check raise. It's an easy fold. And now, I mean, and I also just, there's just so many bad cards, and every one of his hands in his range possible has almost assuredly 6 outs against me, if not more. And so I just want to shut out a ton of his equity and make a typical continue or a protection bet there. I open 10-9 suited. I don't get 3-bet by time KPR. I think this is probably a profitable C-bet. I think a lot of it will fold out for sure, like any of his 5s, 6s, 7s, his ace-5 suited type hands that aren't spades. It's just really hard for him to fight back on me against that on that board when I'm c-betting it. If I had if I had a stronger of a draw, I'd probably go for a check raise on that board some of the time too. That might be a valuable option. Short putt limp plays a lot of his small blinds, but a lot of them are to limps. And he does random things like limp re-raise, like the first time you do it, and all this random jazz that you're probably not used to seeing from most 5-10 regulars. So if I'm going to play pretty straightforward to these limps pre-flop, and then post-flop just make a lot of small raises against him, because he likes to limp, see a lot of flops, but then if he doesn't connect, he likes to like bet half pot and then fold to a lot of raises. So until he starts reacting to that, I'm probably going to take that sort of line with a lot of my trashier hands. And to balance that out, anytime I hit like top pair or a decent middle pair, I'm going to be just raising for value. And there's just not a lot he can do on those dry boards because he can like 3-bet me, but like what's he representing if his small blind raising range is all of his strong hands and his limping range is like his mediocre hands he wants to see flops with, and then it comes out dry, like what are you representing if it's like 10-6-2? So I have a lot more hands in my range because he's limping. I just have all my hands, so it's a fairly preferable spot for me to be able to rep a ton of hands. And still opening here. I wouldn't mind a 4-bet here against CAC Biker. I don't think I do because I looked at his 3-bet stat and it was like 2% and 0 from the big blind out of 21. The only reason I would like it is because I have the ace for removal, and I also don't think he's 3-betting like pocket 10s there to get it in. He's just like not that type of player. And I also think I've been opening so much that his mentality with if he woke up with a huge hand like aces or kings there would probably be to slow play it and like flat it against me and then like check min raise the flop instead of 3-betting it because he doesn't want to in his eyes like push me off of a hand or like scare me away. So I think a lot of that could lead to a really good 4-betting spot there with the ace. And I think also if he's got like jacks or queens, sometimes he'll flat my 4-bet and it will give me an opportunity to, if I do spike that ace, it'll be really hard for him to get away. So with the ace-9 offsuit, not the best hand to be 4-betting with a ton of the time, but in that scenario I definitely wouldn't have minded it at all. I think I go for a 3-barrel here if this is the hand I'm remembering right against short putt. Oh, no. This is a hand where I turn the queen and bet 3 times for value. C-bet on this flop here. Try to push him off just like a hand exactly like I have, like a queen-jack, a king-jack, maybe like a 7-8 of diamonds type hand. Just a ton of hands I can push him off of on that flop, and it also represents a lot of good barreling opportunities if I pick up a 9, a king, an ace, queen, or jack. I'm going to bet for value. So in the top right, I do something a little, I guess, fishy, but I think it's really good to see how people are going to react to all your hands when it's not going to lead to tough decisions for you. So I bet like 20 on this monotone flop against time KPR just to see how he was going to react to that. And it's definitely not the most optimal bet size. Just if I post this hand of, okay, flop game out like monotone, what do I do, guys? No one would suggest betting 20 here, because it's probably not the most optimal bet size by far. But I just wanted to see what he's going to do, and if I can take it away with 20 here, whenever it comes out like this, I'm going to want to be betting 20 now. So just to see how he reacts. I think most people's reactions is to call here and then see what I do, and then he's going to decide on the turn. I think the 8 of hearts is an okay bluff card. Get him off of like 5-6 or whatever, but I'm not exactly sure if he's defending that. I think his most likely hand that I could bluff him off of is like a ace 10 with the 10 of spades, something like that. And he might even call that down given my weird bet sizing. I bet on the in the top left, I bet 120, like 3/4 pots, trying to make it as like kind of fishy as possible. The clubs missed, backdoor straights missed. I think I'm going to get a lot of hero calls here. The 7's very unlikely to help his hand. I think he would have raised me before if he had Queen Jack B. So I think the only hand I'm really losing to is like, I don't even know what I'd be losing to here. Something slow played, I guess. Maybe like ace queen of clubs if he didn't decide to raise the flop or whatever. But he does call, and time KPR ends up taking a line that I think is very obvious of him taking that line. Or I think it's a very expected line for him to take. And I didn't get a ton of information from my proven bet there, so I guess that was kind of a missed opportunity to just take down that pot. But you never know. He could have had a big hand and actually saved myself money. So I think just the opportunity to see how he was going to react there was a good idea that probably didn't work out that time. Odd situation here in the top left. I don't know if the Hold'em manager flashed it, but short putt called me down with ace 10, which I think is very reasonable and very expected. That's the bulk of the range, the value range that I'm really trying to extract from on that river. So not too interesting by there, but I think it's definitely a good opportunity for me to barrel there. Per adventure, I guess. 3 bets me here, squeezes. He hasn't been squeezing a lot, and when people do this with these type of stats like 2015, and like, it just seems like he expects to use his tight image to garner a lot of folds from me. So I think he's very, very, very polarized here. I don't think he's 3-betting like ace queen, even though it's 4-handed. I don't think he's 3-betting like ace queen or 10s to like get it in here. Like and if he is, like, I don't know. I just didn't get the feeling in this hand from how he had been playing similar squeeze situations. I've got like 500 hands against him. That this was a spot where he was going to do it for thin value. It was going to be much more polarized here. And so I've got 2 options here. I can 4-bet here, but I think that allows him to play way too well against my range. And I also think with his larger bet sizing here, I think it's much more indicative of, obviously I have a blocker to aces and kings, and I think if he does have like a value hand, it's going to be much more often like ace king here than it is 10s or jacks. And so I think what's going to happen, what my plan was with his bet sizing here, was to call and then shove over a lot of c-bets on basically any board to try to fold him off ace king as well. And I can't really explain why. I felt it was more lean to like a polarized range, and if he did have value like ace king, but it just seemed like that for whatever reason. And just, I guess, from latent experience with him. And we get a flop here of ace 5-2, which is definitely great, because if he's got a polarized range, he's going to try to over-rep this board, because in his mind, I can never hit this board. I wouldn't defend with 2s, 5s, or 3-4. And so if I'm getting it in, it's like with ace 10 or like a big flush draw or whatever. at best, so my range is really capped in his eyes. So it's really good when you can extend past your perceived the cap of your perceived range and actually have a hand past that. And so it's kind of like a slow play pre-flop with how the flop ended up. And he checks to me, which I think is very indicative of having, like, I guess queens or kings. Maybe like an ace king that doesn't want to scare me off or something because it's so dry that he wants me to stab at it or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I want to make this half pot bet here just to see how he's going to react to it, and also obviously I have basically the nuts against his range. He makes a huge check raise here, and I immediately go to shove, which I think is definitely fine. I mean, he's got 280 left. He's never folding, and I'm way ahead of his range to get it in here, so it's fine. In terms of hands to show up, I guess like a flush draw, some random flush draw. I don't think he ever plays a hand that beats my hand like this. So I think it's really bad in terms of balance purposes for him if he has a flush draw. Because I think there's a lot of times where I'm going to show up with like pocket 10s, pocket 9s that like didn't want to get in pre-flop or whatever, but thought he was light enough to actually like peel a flop. Or maybe like a king-queen suited. And I think he's much better off if he has a flush draw, just like betting and getting it in that way, than allowing me to stab here. Because when he checks here, people just generally on this flop, if they're like have like a polarized situation, they're not really check raising this for value ever. So it really turns his hand face up here, and so I really don't like that play by him. And it also loses him the opportunity to push me off of like pocket 9s here. If he checks, I check behind, and then like the turn's just like a brick, and then he bets like half pot, and I call. Now the river, he's going to be really worried that I'm never folding like ace 10, so he's going to check or maybe put out a bet. Maybe I've improved by then. So he's just giving up the lead for no real reason, because he's not going to gain enough bet folds from me to make this huge check raise profitable, compared to just betting through and getting me to fold a lot of my hands that are technically beating 7 high, but he's got a lot of equity against. So I think he really screwed up there. He should just be betting there. If you're going to 3-bet with 4-7 suited, that's pretty much the best flop you can hope for. An ace-high board where my perceived range is capped, plus you have the gut shot and the flush draw. What else are you really hoping for? You just got to bet. And I take a note there. And for the most part, which is my note taking, I just kind of paste a hand history or two in there, and then say, hey, look at like post flop, look at river bet sizing, just stuff like that, which gets a little cumbersome if I'm playing a bunch of tables, but in general it works pretty well. And we opened here with 8-7 clubs. We've been pretty active pre-flop on that table. And he check calls, and I think he's got a very wide range for check calling here. I think he's got so many like pocket 7s with the 7 of diamonds. Notice I don't have any diamond blockers to like pocket pairs, so he's peeling with all of those. He's peeling probably with 4-5 suited, maybe even a hand like I have, like 8-9 suited, 7-8 suited. He'll peel with ace jack with the jack of diamonds, king queen with the queen of diamonds, all of those hands he's peeling. And the 6 of clubs, you might think, well, that's a pretty terrible double barreling card because he's never folded anything for value. Well, yeah, but like his value range on this flop when he's not check raising is very, very narrow. And I don't think he's check calling with nearly as many like 6-7s on this board as he is with just like straight diamonds or diamonds and gut shots, whatever. So I think it's a really profitable double barrel spot, and as long as I'm triple barreling as well, because I think he's going to peel another one since I just showed that queen there in the hand, maybe an orbit before. So if I'm double barreling here, I'm definitely triple barreling, and this river's really good for it because it can never improve. Like if it was like a queen, now like maybe his king queen hit a pair. His queen 10 hit 2 pair, whatever. I never expect to bluff him off a 10 here. Maybe like a 10-8 randomly, like a stray weak 10. But he's got such a wide range here that I think I just make a big bet on the river here. I don't want to make like a half pot bet on this river here because um, I think he's likely to just look me up too quickly with like a pocket fives type hand, just trying to like get back at me for value betting him so thinly. So I want to make it really a tough decision against him, and he does end up folding. So I think it's very likely he had like a pocket eights with the eight of diamonds or whatever, and it's a tough call in the river. That board just ran out pretty terrible for his check call range by the time I hit the river. Limp. I raise it up. I think I can make it bigger than that with ace queen. In general, I don't want to be betting this big like this, but I think psychologically betting like $100 straight is going to really freeze these two players who aren't regulars in the game. And also, when I raise pre-flop, I have like whenever someone raises pre-flop, they have ace-king in a lot of these guys' minds. So it's going to take an actual hand. Like, I don't expect to get played back at here ever. I think that if they raise me, it's a flush draw minimum, but most of the time it's like king-jack offsuit. And then Al Creamer calls, and literally the worst card in the deck comes. He's never folding a king, he's never folding any hearts, and he's not floating me on this flop, so I'm definitely just done with this hand. I have no equity, and even if I'm not continuing unless like two aces came on the river. And so it just didn't work out, and he's going to throw out a bet here. I think he should probably be checking with his entire range. Like, I don't know of any hands that make sense for him to bet here on the river, because it's very likely that I don't have much, but I might stab at it from his eyes. I don't think I have a calling range there, really, because it's really, really hard for him to show up with air. So when it's hard for him to show up with air, my calling range becomes severely diminished if I'm not betting at some point before. And I open king 10 there, just make a pretty normal c-bet there. Got the gut shot. If he raised me, I would probably, if he like, his raise size would most likely be a min raise, so I'd probably PO1, hope to hit a king or a queen, and go from there. Time KPR, again, going against him. He seems to be the only regular, well now Wademan came, and then peradventure joined my other table, so I guess they're both regulars. And Wademan I have a little bit of history with. Not really a ton, but he's definitely been known to make some moves on me. I've shown some bluffs against him in the 5-10 games, so I expect to get a little frustrated from him on my left. So it's not the best person to have on my left if I were to restructure these tables how I wanted. I almost always have the best hand this turn here against time KPR. And I wanted to see, it didn't show it, for whatever reason my thing is really screwing up right now. Hold on. Alright, so I tried to fix it, but I'm not exactly sure what that thing was. I think it must have been my internet connection was really screwing up during this without me noticing, because it didn't show my bet against time KPR there with the ace jack, but I had the pot was like 63, the board was ace king 7 something, and he checked back, and I always have the best hand there, so I decided to make an overbet there and just see what he does. So I bet, because I think a lot of the times when he's checking back that board, he's got like king 10, ace like 5 or whatever, and so I bet 90 into 63 just to see what he does, and he quickly folded. So he's going to be giving up on those boards that I think is fine to give up on, but some players won't at that limit. In the top left, I have king jack offsuit. I defended against CAC Biker. I don't think he's the type to be barreling a lot, and I don't think he's got like draws or whatever. So I decide I'm almost always good here when he's betting like this big on this board, and I make a small raise just to try to get like his worst jacks to call one more, because I think like what's going to happen a lot is if I check call here, the turn's going to come like a 6, and he's just going to check behind, and then the river's going to come like a 9, and he'll be scared off or like not call, or maybe it'll come like a 2, and we'll both check, and he'll show like pocket 8s, whatever. But I think when I make this small raise against this player, he's going to peel with like a lot of like ace 4 type hands, pocket 8s, whatever. Jack, for sure, worst jacks, and I almost always have the best hand against him. And I think also if he has a better hand, he's going to slow play it against me. And he might be even a little scared if he's got like pocket queens to go broke here. So I'm not scared at all about him 3-betting me ever. If he calls, I'll probably reevaluate the turn, bet dry turns. I've got a little bit of a looser image here too, for my hands with short putts, so it might cause me to get looked up there. And he does end up folding. I don't think just because he folded though, I don't think it caused me to lose any value. Like if he wasn't calling there, he wasn't going to be betting the turn or whatever unless he improved to beat my hand, most likely. Alright, so it looks like we're up near like 40 minutes. I'll probably go about 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, and see what's that. I'm actually recording this the morning that I'm supposed to fly out for the Cab Card Runners thing to Miami, which I'm pretty excited about. So it should be fun to meet the guys who were fortunate enough to win that contest, and hopefully get some good poker discussion going down there. And also, I've never been to Miami, so pretty excited about that. Back to the tables. The 10-20 table, just like, it never really picks up from what I saw. I mean, the thing is, like, with Rast on my right, it's going to be really hard because he's going to be playing pretty well against me. Like, I'm going to have a hard time making moves. And he's playing like 13-17 or whatever. But with the guy the guy right to his right, pretty short, kind of handcuffs the rest of the table also. And Jungler also likes to flat me a lot, so, and Rake Me Up already took a big pot for me, so I'm forced to kind of not really go into a shell, but just kind of lay low for a little bit until I can reestablish an image, and also until like a big hand happens. And you'll find that a lot. I think I've talked about that in a video or two before, but at like the higher stakes tables, like at a 10-20 table, you'll be playing like, or like especially at like 25-50, if you'll be playing for like 45 minutes forehanded, and there won't be a pot over like 20 big blinds, and then all of a sudden two people get it in light, and then the next like 15 minutes there's 7 all-ins, and so you just kind of have to wait to see how the table's going to start reacting to that. I mean, I'm playing 29-21 down there, which I think I could probably be playing a little bit looser down there with how the table seems to be tight. And I take a note up there in the top right about Al Creamer that shows some weakness and he'll like blind the attack, and that's basically predicated on whenever it's been bet on the flop and then check the turn, he's bet the river 100% in all the hands I've had against him. And it definitely has been in situations where he could easily have those hands every time, but it's more than likely that he's bluffed once or twice in there. So if I do have a hand that I want to play for pot control at some point, checking the turn and then calling any river is going to be a very viable line against him, like a weak top pair hand or such. Opening the king-jack offsuit there, definitely standard open for me. I expect to actually get 3-bet a decent amount by weight him in here. I'm not sure if he does. He doesn't. But if he did, I don't think he has 3-bet me from the small blind yet, so I probably would fold there. I take kind of a weird line at the top right. I bet 15, and I don't think I'm getting called by worse very often. Except, like, I think he's going to, like, spaz out raise like this a lot. And, yeah, like, I don't think he's going to do that with, like, queen 10. So, like, it's like an ace or I'm winning when he spazzes out check raises like that. And plus I've got backdoor equity or whatever. And I might get him to fold, like, his pocket 4s or whatever. So I think that that's fine as long as I'm calling that raise and then getting the showdown and seeing what he shows up with. I hit my jack on the river. I think that's fairly inconsequential. I was probably either ahead or... It's a little bad now because if he bets on the river, he could easily have like missed clubs and I'd have a tough time. He checks and I check behind. He shows ace-4, so it's fine. I'd probably lose the same amount if I make a regular c-bet, but against the majority of his range, I think that small bet is probably going to be a little more profitable. It will also allow me to barrel more into small pots, which players like this are going to care less about small pots and more about big ones. So if you can keep the pot under a certain threshold in their mind, then they're much more likely to be bluffed out of it than bigger pots, which is definitely a preferable scenario when you're in the bigger blind. I'm actually going to go back to that for a second. Okay, so we're looking at the table in the top left. As I said, Time KPR has been pretty active in the small blind before the video started, and then just in general, my experience with him is he likes to 3-bet a lot in these situations. He likes to 3-bet a lot of like ace-jack type hands, king-queen suited, those type of hands, and I'm not exactly sure how he's going to react if I 4-bet here. With my particular hand, if I had a slightly worse hand, I would probably 4-bet. And if I had a slightly better hand, I'd 4-bet for value. But with my in-between hand here, I decided to take a flop and just see how he's going to react, because I think it's very viable that he's been 3-betting me a lot out of this specific position in general and in this session. And so I think if I had a big hand, he'd expect me to 4-bet or to flat a good amount of the time and like slow play it or whatever. So I think he's going to actually be a little more wary of me flatting than 4-betting here. And it's not like I have like the worst hand possible. I have ace-10 offsuit, which isn't a great hand to take against the range I described, but it's okay because I have position, and I think I'm just going to get a lot of credit when I flat here as to like slow playing something, or he's just going to be really scared of like playing back at me or like barreling me here. And I check behind the flop, and I think a lot of people would just auto stab at this flop with that dynamic, but I think it's still possible that he's trapping me a little bit on this flop, like with a random check raise or whatever. And I don't want him to like check raise me with like Jack 10 of hearts and I end up folding the best hand, just any like sort of random hard draw or random straight draw, and I'm forced to fold, kind of negating my position or whatever. So I decided to check again, or check behind on the flop, and then on the turn, I think if he was slow playing something, he's very likely to bet it now, or if he actually like picked up something, he's going to bet it. And if he's going to check again, I think it's very, very indicative with our dynamic at this point that he's just giving up. So I end up, you don't see it, but I end up betting like 150 once he checks, and I think that's going to have a lot more profitability than a bet on the flop. And also some good things can happen when because this board he might like check fold, but then if an ace comes he might try to over rep it a little bit. So some good things can also happen by me checking there, and I can also pick up a like a king of hearts, and now I can push out like his jacks or his like queen jack that was gonna like check raise the flop, and now I can bet the turn and shove the river with a lot of equity and fold equity. I flat fives here. I think it's okay. If Jungler was a little bit more active, I probably would have in terms of 3-betting pre-flop, I have a pretty hard time of making this profitable, I think. Because a lot of times also when he's 3-betting, he's going to make like a small 3-bet, which is going to reopen the action for rest, and that's going to put me in a really, really tough spot. He's been playing the button's been playing pretty snug here, 20-10 over 20 hands. It's very, I don't know where, I guess the database that I had played against him previous was lost with my old college computer. But yeah, from general, I don't have a ton of history with him, but I recognize him, and so I'm going to be playing a little more in line against him until I figure out exactly why I do recognize him. And I check this flop, playing to check fold. If I had a really, no. I was going to say that if I had like a really aggressive dynamic, what I could do is like 3-bet this pre-flop and then to induce a 4-bet bluff and then shove. But I think button versus small blind, a lot of people like in his spot will just be snap getting in with like 7s there much more often than if they were in like middle position or something. So I think with such a depolarized gated in range there, that's not a great play with 5s. And also if Jungler's continuing, he's going to be flatting a lot, so it's going to allow me to take a hand that's going to play really well comparatively out of position and take a three-way in a pot where everyone's range is, I can kind of try to figure out. I debate between checking and betting on this turn. The downsides of betting are that I'm never getting called by worse outside of maybe like ace four. But I also just, I mean, everything he has at least 6 outs against me, probably more, and I don't want to give away free cards here. And I also am able to push out probably slightly better hands. So like 7, 6, 7s, and 8s will probably fold to this bet, if not now on the river probably. And I also can just rep a lot of hands on the river that he can't because he checked back this flop. Like some gut shots. I mean, you don't want to be repping gut shots all the time, but like if the jack of hearts comes, it's going to be really hard for him to call with any part of his range there that he's representing. So I decide that the bet is just worth the protection there, just take it down. If I got called and a blank came off, I would probably just check, assuming he has like a hand like king 5 or something that just didn't want to get raised on that flop, which is definitely the danger of making that bet, in that a lot of his hands that are like kind of weak but better than mine are able to call one bet on there, and then I'm gonna have to shut down a decent amount on blanks. I raised 5-6 offsuit here. Looking at his fold to see bet, 48%, and he actually raises c-bets. I think that's fairly high, 20%. I'd be surprised if that's not high. I check back here. We're basically conceding the pot. I think in this board, he's in the fact that I just won that pot against the gecko here. He's probably going to play back at me a little bit more on this board. Meaning, like, right when I win a pot, I feel like people tend to give me much less credit when I'm on the button in terms of those type of flops, and they're going to be check raising me with a lot of like gut shots, air, just two random, like an over and a gut shot, random stuff like that. And obviously with the 5-6, I don't want to continue there. And it also, with all his draws, he's going to be check raising, and checking back gives me a chance to improve to a hand that I can actually take against those draws. I decided to not 3-bet per adventure here, because I think he's much less likely to 4-bet, like freak out, given the ace-king hand that we saw earlier in the video. So I decided to just call here. Not the best flop for me, especially with big things behind me with only $129. I think a lot of the time, and I think actually per adventure bets 60 here if I remember correctly. Yeah, and it's basically kind of a common thing to do now, but still something to note whenever it happens. Him betting 60 here, whenever you bet a little less than half of the short stack here, it's going to reopen the action when I flat and the short stack shoves with whatever the hell he's going to have, and then per adventure can push over that and really just push me off of a ton of my range, which is definitely a bad scenario to get him. And with my 10s here, it's probably a marginal call without big things behind there, because I don't expect him to be c-betting this blindly, so I think he's at least going to have like king-queen here, and that's got a lot of equity against me, and like his whole range in general has a lot of equity against me, and if I hit my 10, half the time it's going to be a diamond, and it's also going to fulfill some gut shots or whatever. So it's going to be really, really tough to get to showdown profitably here, I think, even with position, and especially with the mitigating factor of the big line behind me. So I decided to just make a pretty tight fold here, which I think is fine. I also think raising's viable, actually, because I think he expects me to call a ton, and when I raise, it might like freeze him a little bit. So I think it's okay, and I've also got two blockers to like all straight draws or whatever. And plus, someone who's playing just like 21-16 is just not going to hit that board nearly as strong as my calling range will if I'm raising. Sixes I open, it gets 3-bet and then flatted by Al Creamer. It's not a terrible spot for me to just jam there because there's so much money out there, and Melinor's almost always going to fold with how aggressive he is shown to be on the button. I think his range is just really, really wide there. If Al Creamer didn't 3-bet or didn't flat that, I was definitely going to shove. But Al Creamer had no idea what his flatting range is there. If it involves hands like Jack 10 suited, then my shove with sixes becomes insanely profitable. If it only involves like hands he's going to call off with, then obviously it's a bad situation. In the bottom left, I open Ace Jack. That thing I was just talking about with the betting half the pot to reopen the action. That really doesn't apply here because betting half the pot would be like 44, and just like it's not worth it to me to reopen the action on this board compared to me betting 44, big thing shoving, like Zimmer calling. Like, now what am I really gonna do? I'm probably gonna call, but it's gonna be really, really tough here. The board's just not nearly, like my hand connects with the board not nearly as well to have that plan work out. And so I just decided to bet 70 and expect to get called by big things a lot. And then if he folds, it's fine. It skipped back there. Let me. Oh, big things just added money. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna have to take a look at my Camtasia of why it's doing this because it wasn't. I don't remember at all about this session like skipping over. And when I played back the first like 20 minutes, it wasn't hiccuping at all. But for whatever reason, my internet connection must have been pretty flaky during this time, which is definitely not something you want to be doing when you're playing a decent amount of tables. It's limped by a short putt in the top left, and a lot of people will raise this ace-2 suited here, but I think I actually can gain more value here. Like, I probably have the best hand pre-flop, but I can gain a lot more value by keeping his range as wide as possible, and then when an ace comes, him trying to represent it too much. And I think I actually end up checking here. Yeah, I check behind. I hit a 2. He checks to me. I bet 15 just for like protection's sake again, and also just like, or maybe I bet. I'm not exactly sure if I like that check or I like a bet there. I'll have to think about that for a second. I actually think I like a. Actually, I don't think it really matters. I think checking there and betting are both fine. He checks to me on the river, and I just bet 10. The turn bet, like, I shut out, like, his 6-7 offsuits or whatever, but I think he probably would stab with a lot of the hands that have any sort of equity against me outside of just the 6 outs for 2 overs. And also, when I do hit my ace, he might try to rep it, or it might give him a pair 2 that I can raise and he'll call off. So, and then with the 2, he might also make some hero calls with ace high if I hit like another 2 on the river or something random. Or if like the river paired 5s, he might make a hero call with ace high. So I think playing it like I did is probably optimal, just checking back and then small value betting the river. It also allows me in those spots, because there's been so many times where I get to the river with just like garbage when he's limping to me, and I've just got 100% of all cards, and the board runs out like that. So I want to be able to find which lines are going to be able to take him off of hands, and when he's likely to have hands he's check calling, and having a hand where you're most likely ahead than just thin value betting. It's not the worst thing in the world when he hooks me up with 4s there, because then he'll just give me credit in all the hands that he doesn't have 4s. I bet 45 here against Al Creamer. Expect to get a ton of folds on those type of boards. He's just never fighting back against me. He's not defending anything with a 3 in it because it's not like good poker from his eyes. And then, like at best, he's gonna have like Queen Jack, King Queen. And there's gonna be a lot of times he's gonna call me with like pocket 5s on a Queen 3-3, no flush draw board, and then fold the turn. So that's gonna make me a lot of profit as well. I bet I lead out 15 here. Against into 2 people here. It was limp to me. I think I'm going to get a lot of calls from Al Creamer, just like flush draws or worse 8s. And I think when I check here, he's just been like betting too often when I'm checking. and I haven't seen any of his hands, so I think this is a decent hand for me to take to showdown and just see what he's doing. And yeah, I allow him to have like a free card with a flush draw, but I think he probably would call a flush draw anyways, and he'll probably bet it when I check to him, so I don't think I'm actually losing any money against that. And I just want to see if, like, when I check to him, he's betting like pocket fives there or whatever. And then the river comes, and he bets, I think something like 100 and... No, actually, I think he bets like 77, if I remember correctly. 80, yeah. And I just make a really easy call here. And he shows king 7 suited. So it's good to know he's limping with king 7 suited, and he's not going to be raising that board with the king. Which means he probably won't be raising it ever with like flush draws or whatever. So if he is raising that board, I don't know exactly what it would possibly have, but I guess maybe just a strong king as his only range, or maybe very just air. And so we're just right at an hour here. I'm probably gonna wait for the next. Actually, I'm gonna try to find a really like just an interesting hand to end it on, and then go from there. So I'm just going to pause the video and then fast forward to it. Okay. Actually, this isn't like a huge hand or whatever, but I think it's actually very interesting. I just fast forward to probably like 5 minutes, whatever. Looking in the bottom right at the ace-king offsuit hand, and that's the game seems to be just a really, really tight player from what I've seen. He hasn't been playing many hands at all. And I play this ace-king definitely not like most people would. And so I look at my early position stats, and out of 26 hands, he hasn't opened one yet, and we're 5-handed. And so, like, middle position, 22%, whatever. But, like, I think this type of player is probably not adjusting his opening range nearly as much as other people would at 10-20 in terms of, I think his range is more likely to be tighter to the early position than looser to the middle position from this position, even though it's 5-handed and he's technically middle position. And so that's the first assumption I'm making on that, which may or may not work out to be true, but it's definitely like a theory to go in with, and then if he shows otherwise, then we adjust it. So I'm starting with that, and I have ace-king offsuit, and a lot of good things can happen here. Like, jungler makes some weird like 3-bets or whatever, so if that's the game is opening up his game or whatever, where he's got like 10s and jungler's making like some random 3-bet bluff here, I can then back raise over him with like ace-king if either of these blinds try to steal. And so I decide to flat here on the button, which is definitely not my normal situation against this player, these type of players, but I just wasn't exactly convinced that I had really any fold equity pre-flop against this player, and I don't think that he's ever getting in worse. Like, I don't think, I mean, he's opening like ace-queen or whatever, but I think he just has such a tight range that he's not opening like queen-jack or whatever. And so I also thought that he'll have like some 10s in his jacks, like pocket 10s type hands that I can take away from him post-flop by just using my position or whatever, if I don't connect. Hit an ace, and he checks to me, which I think is indicative of either a weaker ace or like jacks through kings, 10s through kings. And I think he's going to call a bet here with that range, at least one bet. And I think sizing it like this makes it look like I'm stabbing, and that'll definitely set up some later river bets if I pick up some good cards. The jack of clubs against the range I'm giving him is not the best card. First of all, it now puts ace jack ahead of me and pocket jacks, so now, and it'll cause pocket 10s to fold. So now if I bet, I'm only getting called by ace queen, ace king, ace jack, queens, and like aces, like ace queen, ace king, ace jack, ace 10, of which now I'm only ahead of 2 of those, and tying the one of them. And so against that specific part of this range, a bet's profitable. And then against, because I don't think I'm ever going to get, like, his stack isn't such that he can ever, like, push me off of anything either. If he did check raise me, I'd call it off, but I'd probably be a little worried of him having, like, pocket jacks or pocket 8s. Because it's such, like, a line for, like, a type player to take. If he was opening just randomly, like a 6-5 of clubs type hand, he's c-betting this board a ton. because it's such like a dry ace high flop for a tight player. It's just gold for him to be c-betting. So when he checks, I'm putting him right on a hand that has showdown value. So that weaker ace range, and then those higher pocket pairs. And with the jack, I'm now shutting out tens if I bet. And I'm also probably going to shut out like kings or queens. And so if my plan here was to check behind. I think I check behind, or maybe I make a small bet. Not exactly sure. Let's see what I decide to do. I wouldn't mind a check behind, and I wouldn't mind a small bet here. I think a big bet's gonna just make him play too well, and his stack size is such that if I decide that a river shove's the best, I can just do it. If I make a small bet there, I'm looking at his stats, his early position, what he's been doing so far. I decided to check here, which I think is definitely not standard for players, but I think it might garner me a little bit more value on the river. But I'm not exactly sure if I'm a favorite when called on that turn, because I think he's just check folding like his kings and queens and tens. And so now it's ace jack, ace queen, ace king, and I think ace 10 will probably fold on that turn. Probably not. I'm still undecided about this. I'm not sure if I like this check back. I think it's okay to switch it up with a player and kind of just keep a smaller pot without knowing exactly what he does. And he checks me again on the river, and this 10's just terrible for my range. If I bet the turn, I'm probably betting this river, because I think his pocket tens is now cleaned up, and his ace 10 may have folded. And so now like I'm getting called by like ace queen and kings and queens that are just being stubborn. And I think ace jack would probably check raise me on the turn with his stack size, trying to like in his mind represent a draw or whatever, or just not get outdrawn. So I think if I bet this turn, I'm betting this river. But since I didn't bet the turn, I am checking behind the river, because I'm just not good enough when called to make a value bet here on this river. No flop flush draw miss, nothing like that. And I think he's gonna fold. Like, I don't think he has like ace 9 in his opening range. So all aces except ace queen now beat me. Kings and queens probably aren't calling on this river. So I don't think I have a profitable bet on that river. So I think the interesting spot is definitely the turn of whether I should have check backed or bet. I think when I did this, I thought, oh wow, I'm being so like I'm dissecting his range so well, and I was like proud of myself to like not 3-bet and not bet this turn. But I think I might be getting a little too fancy there in retrospect. I think not 3-betting pre-flop is definitely viable to keep all of like his obvious worst aces in, and also take it away from like pocket tens post-flop when it comes like queen jack 4 and he checks. So I think flatting's definitely viable, and it also opens up those back raise situations against Younger and Mr. Lucky Bands. But I think I should definitely be betting that turn. The pot was like 300. I'm going to go back to it real quick. Yeah, the pot's like 300. His stack's like 650. I think I should bet like 150. And I think that will allow him maybe like 140. Because I think 140 will probably be a little bit less scary than like 150. It'll be easier for him to call. And compared to the $10 of value I'm losing. And I think a 140 bet would put it up to 480, 580. Yeah, like a little under 600. And then he would have like a little over 500. So if a blank river came and he just check called this turn, I could shove the river and I think get called by a lot of his range. So I think that's the preferred line. Bet somewhere between like 140 and 160, and then shove the river on some blanks, check back on some hands that I'm not thrilled about. And so I think that's actually a really intricate spot. Alright, I just had to quick pause that for a second because my phone kept ringing, because apparently our flight's delayed down to Miami and all sorts of changing that around. So sweet Chicago weather at work again. So yeah, just to wrap that up, I think that hand on the end there, yeah, definitely bet like 140, 160, and then shove all safe rivers. And I think that's it. We'll see how it goes from there. Alright, so this is Scout Augustine for cardroast.com.